They called him crazy when he said gasoline engines were obsolete. The mechanic in Garage 7 worked alone, surrounded by old car parts and hand-drawn blueprints. But when the energy crisis hit, every government on Earth was suddenly knocking on his door. Welcome to Quantum Stories. Before we dive into this incredible tale of innovation hiding in plain sight, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from today? And if you believe stories of forgotten geniuses deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button. The garage sat at the end of Industrial Boulevard, squeezed between a tire shop and an abandoned diner. Morrison's auto repair had been there for 15 years, but most people drove past without a second glance. The paint was faded, the sign hung crooked, and the owner never advertised. Frank Morrison was 53 years old with calloused hands and motor oil permanently embedded under his fingernails. During the day, he fixed transmissions, changed brake pads, and listened to customers complain about gas prices that seemed to climb every week. "Can't afford to fill up my tank anymore," complained Mrs. Henderson as she picked up her Honda. "These gas prices are killing us all." Frank nodded sympathetically, but inside his mind was already racing. He had been thinking about this problem for years. While other mechanics saw broken engines, Frank saw inefficiency. While others accepted gasoline as the only option, Frank questioned everything. When the last customer left at 6 p.m. and the fluorescent lights dimmed, Frank became someone entirely different. He would disappear into the back corner of his garage, behind a curtain of old tarps and forgotten car parts. There, in a space no bigger than a bedroom, sat his real workshop. The walls were covered with hand-drawn diagrams, mathematical equations scribbled on napkins, and photographs of engine components taken from every angle. Notebooks filled with calculations covered every surface. Some dated back 12 years to when Frank first started asking a simple question. What if we didn't need gasoline at all? The breakthrough came on a Tuesday night in March, after Frank had spent 14 hours straight working on a particularly stubborn transmission. He was exhausted, running on coffee and determination, when he noticed something peculiar about the magnetic field patterns he had been studying. For months, Frank had been experimenting with electromagnetic induction, trying to harness the same principles that powered electric generators, but in a completely different way. He had read every physics textbook he could afford, watched university lectures online, and even corresponded with professors who thought he was a graduate student. That night, as he adjusted the copper coils in his prototype, something clicked. Not literally clicked. The change was subtle, almost imperceptible. But the electromagnetic frequency readings on his jury-rigged equipment suddenly stabilized in a way they never had before. Frank stared at the numbers, certain he had made an error. He checked his connections, verified his calculations, and ran the test again. The results were identical. He had stumbled onto something that defied conventional understanding of energy conversion. The prototype wasn't just generating power, it was generating more power than it consumed. Frank spent the next 3 days running continuous tests, afraid to believe what he was seeing. By Friday, he was certain. He had created a self-sustaining electromagnetic engine that could run indefinitely without fuel. The implications hit him like a physical blow. This wasn't just an improvement on existing technology. This was a complete revolution. But Frank was also realistic. He was a mechanic in a small garage, not a scientist with credentials. Who would believe him? Who would even listen? Frank's first instinct was to contact the experts. He spent weeks crafting detailed emails to automotive companies, energy corporations, and university research departments. He documented everything meticulously: his calculations, his test results, even photographs of the prototype in action. The responses were swift and unanimous. Ford's automated reply thanked him for his interest, but explained they only considered proposals from certified engineers. General Motors never responded at all. ExxonMobil's legal department sent a cease and desist letter, somehow interpreting his inquiry as a threat. The University of Minnesota's physics department forwarded his email to their security office, apparently concerned about an unstable individual making wild claims. Professor Sarah Chen from MIT actually called him back, which gave Frank hope until he realized she thought he was experiencing a mental health crisis. Sir, she said gently, what you're describing violates the laws of thermodynamics. I understand you're passionate about clean energy, but perhaps you should speak with someone. Frank tried to explain, to offer demonstrations, to provide evidence. But without a PhD, without published papers, without institutional backing, he was just another crackpot with impossible claims. The rejection deepened his isolation. Frank stopped trying to convince anyone and returned to his garage, spending every free moment refining his design. He built multiple prototypes, each one more efficient than the last. He powered his entire garage with a unit no bigger than a briefcase. He ran heating, lighting, and all his equipment without connecting to the electrical grid. Still, no one knew. No one cared. Frank began to wonder if he would take his discovery to the grave, another forgotten genius whose ideas died in obscurity. Everything changed in October when the energy crisis hit. It started with a pipeline explosion in Texas that cut off 30% of the nation's fuel supply. Within days, gas prices doubled. Within weeks, they doubled again. Panic spread across the country as people realized that modern life depended entirely on cheap energy. Factories shut down. Transportation systems collapsed. The government declared a national emergency and announced a desperate search for alternative energy solutions. Congress allocated $50 billion for research into any technology that could replace fossil fuels. Scientists around the world were invited to submit proposals with the promise that successful innovations would receive unlimited funding and support. Frank watched the chaos unfold from his garage, knowing he already had the solution sitting on his workbench. But the same doubt that had plagued him for years returned. Would they listen this time? Or would they dismiss him again as a delusional mechanic? The decision was made for him when his neighbor, Tom Bradley, stopped by the garage. Tom had noticed that Frank's building was the only one on the block still brightly lit, despite the rolling blackouts. "How are you keeping the lights on?" Tom asked. "Generator?" Frank hesitated, then made a choice that would change everything. "Something like that," he said. "Want to see?" He led Tom to the back room and showed him the prototype. A device no bigger than a car battery, humming quietly as it powered every system in the building. Tom was a retired electrical engineer, and his face went pale as he realized what he was looking at. "Frank," he whispered, "do you understand what this is?" "Yeah," Frank replied. "It's the answer to everything." Tom convinced Frank to contact the Emergency Energy Task Force that had been established in Washington. This time, Frank didn't send an email. Tom used his connections to arrange a direct phone call with Dr. Elizabeth Harris, the task force director. "Dr. Harris," Tom said during the call, "I'm looking at a device that could end the energy crisis tomorrow." Within 6 hours, a team of federal scientists was on a plane to Minnesota. Within 12 hours, they were standing in Frank's garage, staring at an impossible machine. Dr. Harris ran test after test, each one confirming what Frank had known for months. The device generated clean, unlimited energy with no fuel input. It violated everything they thought they knew about physics, but it worked. "How long have you had this?" she asked Frank. 12 years, he replied. "I tried to tell people. No one would listen." The next morning, Frank's garage was surrounded by government vehicles. Not to arrest him, but to protect him. Within days, teams of engineers were reverse engineering his design. Within weeks, the first commercial prototypes were in production. Within months, the energy crisis was over. Frank Morrison became the most important person on Earth overnight. The mechanic who had been ignored, dismissed, and ridiculed was suddenly hailed as the savior of civilization. But Frank didn't want fame or fortune. He just wanted to fix things. And finally, he had fixed the biggest problem of all. So I ask you, have you ever met someone who seemed ordinary but was actually extraordinary? Someone whose ideas were dismissed until the world desperately needed them? Share their story in the comments. Let us know who they were and how they changed your life. And if this story inspired you, subscribe to Quantum Stories. We're here to honor the forgotten geniuses who shape our world from the shadows. We'll see you in the next story. And remember, sometimes the answer to tomorrow's problems is hiding in today's garage.